We're going to start Perek Gimel. Perek Gimel in Avos has this, I would say, iconic Mishnah. Hakavi b'ma'alal eloimer histaka b'shloish dvorim ve'ina taboli de aveira. Da ma'ayim basa lo'ona ta'hoylech l'fnei mi ata'oseb l'tindim l'cheshbon. Now, the interesting thing is that this Mishnah is the result of a very hard life. Akavia had a very difficult time. He was a unique individual with very strong independent ideas. The Mishnah in Horayos tells us he argued strongly and vocally against some of the Tanoim, and they asked him, they said, Chazar b'cha, recant some of your opinions, renege some of the days that you have, v'na'asecha av bezdin, and we'll turn you into the av bezdin. And he said, no. He said, Eini yochel, I can't. I'd rather be a shoyte kol yomai. I'd rather be a fool all my days. And I shouldn't look like an evil person in front of God. I shouldn't make any concessions against what I believe is the truth. And it says, B'shas misosai, when he was dying, he called his son over and he told him, B'ni chazar b'cha, you should concede, follow the majority. He says, Father, what are you telling me? He says, no. He says, it's different. Ani shamati mipi amerubim, v'hem shama mipi amerubim. I had a right to argue. I came with the force of an opinion that was buttressed by a majority. But you only came with the force of an opinion that you heard from me. You have to relent. You have to follow the majority, otherwise there'll be terrible machlokes in Klal Yisrael. And it says that he asked his father, his son says, so you're so lauded and people like you so much, speak about me, give me a letter of recommendation, let me get a position. And his father said no. And his son was upset. On his deathbed, his father rejected him. And he says, Shema p'gamat sosabi, did you find something wrong with me? So his father said, no, I see nothing wrong with you. You're a good son, but ma'asecha yikarvucha, ma'asecha yirachakucha. We have to work on a merit basis. Your actions, they'll promote you, and your actions might demote you. It can't be something that I'm going to work for you. That's not correct leadership. That's not acceptable in Klal Yisrael. Akavia was a pure person in every sense of the word. There is an alternate story about who Akavia was. But the Gemara doesn't accept it, and the Mishnah doesn't accept it, and the Talmud in Brachos doesn't accept it. Ein Azara in Elis. There was no, in the Azara, you could seal the whole Azara with all of Klal Yisrael in it, and Akavia was the greatest. Yet, his life didn't turn out the way we would have expected it. And it almost looks like he had a certain, you're not allowed to say, but a certain stubbornness, a certain strong streak, which didn't allow him to buck, which didn't allow him to bend. And we want to talk a little bit about this midah of akshanas. But before, there is a holy akshanas, and then there's a very unholy and devastating, destructive akshanas. And I want to talk a little bit about this midah. Just before we start, I'm just reminded of the fact that in the Muslim culture, they have what's known a word for somebody who creates innovation, something that's against what they consider their trend, their tradition and the transmission of the Quranic hadith and sunnah view. They call it the bid'ah. Bid'ah means boda, new, something created, like b'chodesh asher boda miliboy. So, and this concept of bid'ah is an innovation. And there are some sects in Islam that fight terrifically against bid'ah. One example is the holiday of the Maulid, which we understand the word, it means Molid, a birthday. Some celebrate the birthday of Muhammad, and others consider it an innovation. It started in the early 1900s, it was an innovation. It isn't acceptable. And this Mishnah of Akavi ben Ma'alalel also had some interesting machlokes that surrounded it. I once saw in the Kolboi, which is a Sefer on Avelis written by Rabbi Greenwald from Columbus, Ohio, that many Levites would start with this Mishnah of Akavia ben Ma'alalel. This Mishnah held him in good stead. It was a very strong Mishnah. It buttressed him through, I would say, a very turbulent life. It buoyed him, it carried him, the three things that a person has to always hold in his mind is ma'ayin basa. You know where you came from, you're really nobody. You came from a small seed. Lo natahoylach, you know where you're going to, l'mekoyim ofar. Rima v'seleya, you're going to be in a grave. And he says, you have to also be aware that your judge is not a simple judge. He's a judge that has every ability and capacity to see through you, around you, and about you. These ideas held Akavya throughout a very difficult life and held him to the straight and narrow to doing what he thought was right. This Mishnah is a Mishnah that's generally said over, or was for many, many years said over in Levias. In fact, many Algerian, North African communities said this Mishnah by Levias. The Gesher Achaim is a famous sefer on death and mourning, brings down that it's a minik pasha to say this Mishnah by Levias. Yet, Rabbi J.J. Greenwald in his sefer Ach Litzora, then it was an enlarged compendium which was called Kolboy, 2 volumes eventually. He brings down in chapter 4 that this was considered an innovation. And as Jews, we reject innovation. We call it Chodesh, it's Asur Min HaTorah. We don't like it at all. And I think over time, the people that felt it was an innovation, they won. And we don't hear it said in Levias that often. So this Mishnah seemed to have gone the way of a lot of different things that have machlokes surrounding it. And I don't hear that it's said in Levias that much. Now, the Midah of Akshanas, which in some cases is a holy, a person who doubles his effort, doesn't take defeat. Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'kam, the Pasuk in Mishlei says, Ki Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'kam. A tzaddik sometimes has to fall 7 times in order to get up and be established. So this idea of constantly getting up, Isnari Me'ofa Kumi, Livshi Bigdei Sefartechami, this concept is generally seen as almost a fingerprint on anybody that belongs to the Klal Yisrael club. We're an Am Kishei Oiref, we never yield, we never buckle. This is probably one of the biggest reasons that our durability is such. Because we're Akshei Oiref, we do have this midah of holy akshanos. On the other hand, we see that Paro, he was terrible action, ended up subjecting his nation to 10 grueling makis with the final Yamsuf and the eventual complete collapse of Malchus Mitzrayim. So, and I want to talk a little bit about akshanos and what it could do and why it is a negative tchuna and why there are certain cases and situations where it could only be the total ruination of an individual. And one of the places that I find, and I've spoken about it in the past, I enjoy talking about this parak in Yirmiyah, is a discussion between 2 Nevi'im. Yirmiyah, a Navi, who we know was a Navi Emes, but he had a very harsh and strong message to Klal Yisrael. He had a message of impending destruction. He had a message of impending exile. His message was always about Hashem's dissatisfaction with Klal Yisrael. It was a very harsh message. It was a very difficult message. And often it was a message that people didn't want to hear, people rejected. And I think that Chazal tell us that a person who was a competitor of Yirmiyah used to say Nevuah B'Shuk HaTachten, was Hanani ben Azur. He was a competitor, but he liked to have an upbeat message. Upbeat messages always got crowds, and probably he fed off that. Chazal tell us that he started off as a Navi Emes. He wasn't a Navi Sheker. He was somebody that understood the value of Yirmiyah. He understood the value of Torah. He recognized greatness, but he had difficulty with a message that was always negative. And the truth is we find that Tzidkiyahu and others during the time of Yirmiyah had very difficult time with Yirmiyah's message. They asked him, Madua Tadei Ra Yehudim, why do you speak so negative? And could be they understood that a Navi really talks with tints and tinges of his personality. So they were asking him, why do you have such a negative view that everything that comes through you and filters through you is so negative? Hanani had a positive message. And it's interesting that they had a showdown, and this is brought down in Yirmiyah Perek Chavches. Hanani gets up, and he has a large crowd, and he hears Yirmiyah saying that the exile is going to take 70 years, it's going to be a hard time. And Yirmiyah is advising Klal Yisrael to settle in, and Hanani comes and says, no, it's a 2-year exile. Ba'oich nasayim yomim ani meishiv el hamokim hazeh es kol klei beis Hashem asher lokach Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel. Everything. I'm reinstating the Melucha. Ves Yechanya ben Yoyakim melech Yehuda. I'm bringing him back. Ani meishiv el hamokim hazeh. I'm reinstating the Malchus. I'm reinstating the Melucha. I'm going to do everything as a Geula Shleima. Hanani gives a 2-year limit. And Yirmiyah is listening. He says, Gewalt, what are you doing to these people? You're lifting them and you're giving them hope. It's almost like Shabsai Tzvi. And Hanani ben Azar was very similar to a Shabsai Tzvi character. And Yirmiyah says, Amen, Ken Yasa Hashem. I hope it's like that. Yokim Hashem is Dvarecha. But he says, Shmana Adover Azeh Asher Anechi Dever Be'oznecha. He says, but listen, pay attention to what I'm saying, he tells Hanani. The Nevi'im that were here before you and before me, and they prophesied on lands, and they prophesied on great kingdoms, and they prophesied about war and about devastation. So here's the basic rule. He says, a prophet who says a good prophecy, the only way you'll know if this prophet is saying the truth is if the prophecy comes true. Because a good prophecy never gets annulled. Hashem always wants to bring a good prophecy. And if he actually sent this prophecy in the hand of the Navi, it has to come true. A bad prophecy, he says, my prophecies don't have to come true and I could still be a Navi Emes. So he says, you're making a mistake by prophesying something so positive. There's a toast you're making. And Hanani gets so angry at Yirmiyah. He recognizes the truth of the message. And he comprehends the challenge. So he says to him, he walks up to him and he grabs, Yirmiyah was wearing yokes of wood around his neck. Those were a symbol of the exile. He was wearing yokes of wood around his neck. And Hanani walks up to him and he takes those yokes and he breaks them off his neck. A symbol of destruction, of chutzpah, of rebuke publicly to Yirmiyah. And Yirmiyah finally says to him, now listen. He says, even though I don't have to bring a siman, and the Yerushalmi and Sanhedrin and Perek Yud Aleph explains this pretty clear. He says, I don't have to give you a siman. And I don't have to prove that what I'm saying is going to come true. But I'm going to do it. It wasn't anger. It was the word of Hashem that came to Yirmiyah. He says, I'm not telling you in anger. He says, Koyamar Hashem tzvakos. Hashem says like this, these yokes you just broke, I'm going to replace them with metal yokes. I'm going to replace them with much harsher burdens. It's not going to be a picnic for Klal Yisrael. You know why? They're supporting you. You're feeding off them. They're not willing to take the word of Hashem the way it comes properly. So you caused and brought a sin on them, and the retribution is going to be plural for everyone. And furthermore, and he says, as for you, I'll use you and show everybody the siman of the right and true prophecy that I have. Hashana hazeh atom meis. This year, koyamar Hashem. He says like this, so says Hashem, Hineni meshalechecha ma'al pnei ha'adam ha'ashana. I'm sending you, I'm vanquishing you away from this world this year. And Hashana atom meis kisora dibarta al Hashem. Because you spoke negatively against Hashem. Vayomos Hananya hanavi b'shana ahi b'chodesh hashvi. Now I want to share this with you, and I've shared it in the past, but you have to understand, the discussion over here was on Nisan. It was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And Yirmiyah and Hanani have this showdown in the marketplace, somewhere in the Galil, or in Yerushalayim, I'm not sure. And they have this back and forth where Yirmiyah finally gives a siman and he says, this year you will die. As Jews we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the end of the sixth month, the year is over. Because then starts Tishrei, which is the 7th month, right? So Hanani died, it says, Vayomas Hanani Hanavi Bashana Ahi B'chodesh Hashvi. He died in the 7th month. If he died in the 7th month, then Yirmiyah's prophecy did not come true. Yirmiyah said, Hashana hazeh atom meis. Hashana atom meis. This year you will die. Kisora dibarta al Hashem. You spoke negatively on Hashem. So if he died b'chodesh hashvi, then he did not accomplish what he was looking for. So the Yerushalmi builds into this pasuk an amazing story. Hanani, when his children were going to shul at night for Rosh Hashanah, he said, look, he says, there's a few hours left in this day. But I promise you, he said, when you come back tonight after services, I will not be alive, he said. Because Yirmiyah is a true prophet. I messed with the wrong guy. And if he said, Ashana Atames, I will be dead tonight by the time you come back. I'm begging you, I don't want it to look like his word was the truth. I want to gaslight Klal Yisrael forever. And I want them to always have the possibility that Yirmiyah was not saying the truth. And the only way that could be happening and be affected is if you put me in my bed, you tell everybody I'm sick, you announce my death a day or two after Rosh Hashanah. Then it'll be B'Chodesh Hashvi, I'll gaslight Klal Yisrael. I'll have that niggling doubt in their mind, and it'll stay forever. Maybe Yirmiyah didn't say the truth. Maybe Yirmiyah did not have the actual nevuah. I'll go down in history as somebody that was a very valid foe, a very good, I would say, counterbalance to Yirmiyah. And his children were ever so obedient. They did that. They placed him in his bed. And at night, when people were asking, "Where's your father? Where's your father?" He was legend, and people were looking. That he's sick. It's true. He might not make it, but to tell you the truth, Yirmiyah is not saying the truth either, because it's already in the 7th month. And then ultimately, when he's alive the next day, or fake alive, but he's alive the next day, and a day later, they put out a koil. Hanani died. Nobody sees. They bury his already very rancid body. And now Yirmiyah is left in the eyes of Klal Yisrael as a possibility of a Navi Sheker. That's what the Psukim say. Vayomas b'shanahi. Vayomas Hananya Navi b'shanahi. And you have to know, Hananya Navi was a Navi Emes, Chazal tell us. He played wrong. His stubbornness destroyed him. He wasn't able to admit defeat even on his deathbed. The last act he did on his deathbed was to sabotage the only hope Klal Yisrael had. Yirmiyah was a Navi Emes. Had Klal Yisrael listened to him, they would have ended up accelerating the years of exile, and their tshuva would have been accepted. Hanani's stubbornness destroyed him, destroyed Klal Yisrael. I can't imagine that he has a portion in the world to come, although I don't know, Chazal don't tell us. But I can't imagine that a person like this has a portion in the world to come. The act of sabotage is so great. The deceit is so profound. What he did to Klal Yisrael is so troubling. How could this person have a chelik in Olam Haba? How could he even think that he would be able to get away with this? This stubbornness is a concept that's mavir es adam al daitev al das koinai. It destroys a person's clarity. It destroys a person's ability to see straight, to think proper. And that's what happened with Hanani. I want to tell you, I read in a good book by somebody named Sam Keen. It was called Caesar's Last Breath. I read about two very stubborn people that were really destroyed by their stubbornness also. And these are good mishalim that I'd like to just share with you. A guy by the name of Harry Randall Truman, not to be confused with his great uncle Harry S. Truman. This fellow was born in the 1900s. He died in 1982. He was a fast-talking, very, very foul-mouthed individual. He moved to Mount St. Helens, Washington in the 30s after fighting in World War I and winning some sort of a star or something. And he opened a hotel, a bed and breakfast, together with one of his wives. I forgot, he was married multiple times, on top of the mountain. Now, in the 70s, and he became very attached to it. He was iconic. He was considered the mountain. The mountain was him. People would come visit him. It was a very strong legend that mountain had, together with Harry R. Truman. Now, in 1978, 79, seismologists are coming, and they're measuring what they consider the most active live volcano in the whole United States, and that was Mount St. Helens in Washington. And they felt that it was about to rupture, and everybody evacuated from the mountaintop except for Harry Truman. And he didn't believe the seismologist. He felt it was all fake science. Even though things were moving, there were tremors, there were aftershocks. It was very visible. His own hotel constantly got cracks in it, and it was obvious that something was about to happen. But he refused. His wife had already died. He was a man. He was 81 or 82. He had 16 cats. I once read later that it could be the cats gave him a disease called toxoplasmosis, which somehow something erodes in his brain and he becomes addicted to them and they wouldn't move. So he stayed there with them and he wasn't really responsible for anything he did. But it doesn't look like that's what happened. It looks like he was extremely stubborn. He said many times, they're going to have to peel me off the mountain. And that's indeed what happened in 1982 when Mount St. Helens erupted. There was never a trace of Harry R. Truman seen again. He became pulverized. He evaporated into thin air. He was the only casualty, I believe, in that eruption because everybody had evacuated for miles and miles around. This was one of the most anticipated and most predicted volcanoes, but he was very stubborn. He had a certain mission, and this was. I also read there's a book. It's called The Power Broker. It's a book about this fat. It's got like 1,300 pages in it, maybe 1,400 pages. It's written by a Jewish fellow by the name of Robert Caro. I wonder if he's the grandson of Rabbi Yosef Caro. But he writes about Robert Moses. Robert Moses was also a Jew, a Meshumad. He actually became a Catholic. But Robert Moses was responsible for most of the roads and the structure of New York City. Never in the history of a democracy and elected officials was there somebody as powerful as Robert Moses. The man held so much power, with the stroke of a pen, he was able to wipe out hundreds of houses through eminent domain. He could have a road running right through a neighborhood and destroy anything he wanted. And he was unchecked for 40 years. He fought against any politician. He was very skillful. He knew how to underpin and attack and destroy. And he got his way. The BQE is his, Central Park is his, Prospect Park is his. All of these are his creations. The Mushaloo Parkway, Ocean Parkway, Eastern Parkway, everything it's all him. Everything was what he did, and he was probably one of the most brilliant architects. And the truth is, the Long Island project is his. He was a very big racist. As troubling as it is for me to see a Jew, that we suffer so much from racism, and we suffer so much from people who don't like us, that he should be such a racist was very, very unappetizing. And famously, what he did was when he was building the Long Island highways and byways, he made sure all the overpasses were very low to prevent buses from coming. He didn't want low income and black people to come to Long Island beaches. He wanted them to stay in the ghettos. He didn't want them in the nice neighborhoods. This is true. This is something that's documented. Very sad. He also built swimming pools for the public. They were able to attend, I think it was a tremendous amount of public swimming pools. They were able to accommodate, I think, over 10,000 people. And he had this silly notion that black folk didn't like cold water. So he kept the swimming pools a couple of degrees colder in order to keep them out. This was not a good man. But one must know that for many, many years, Robert Moses was the most powerful person in the United States. He had the power of an emperor. And people even forgive him. They saw what he did. They recognized the beauty of his creation. They understood his superior understanding of a city's guts and a city's structure. And then when things got out of hand, he couldn't suffer any defeat. His stubbornness was so that there was no opposition that he wasn't going to fight and go after. So then people started unearthing all these things about him. And he goes down in history as a not very good person. Most people who study Robert Moses will see that his stubbornness eroded his legacy. He has a legacy of racism, a legacy of bullyishness, a legacy of coldness, maybe psychopathy, all pretty much because he didn't know how to back down. He didn't understand when the time is up, you could admit defeat, you could walk away. You don't have to see everything through. The Chafetz Chaim used to call it durchführen. No, Robert Moses was the prince of durchführen. So we find over here that the midah of akshanas is a very problematic midah. On the other hand, we also find that akshanas is a very good thing. We find that akshanas could land a person in a position and in a spot that's not shaykh for him. Because if you stick, I forgot, I once read a Harvard report that 4 out of 5 businesses fail. And the ones that actually succeed are the ones that don't mind failure. And they keep going down and getting up. They keep going down and getting up. So Akshanis has a very valid place and spot for a Jew. So, and I want to see it a little through the prism of Rish Lakish. And I'll explain. The Gemara tells us. So, and I want to explain it like this. I'm going to explain it like this. Basically, what I'm trying to explain and what I'm trying to handle with right now is like this. Mitzad echad, you find Akshanis is a terrible thing. I'm listing the Akshanis of Hanani ben Azur, the Akshanis of Paroi, the Akshanis of Robert Moses, the Akshanis of Harry Randall Truman. These are terrible things. These are people that lost everything through their stubbornness. On the other hand, Klal Yisrael is known to be an Am Kshei Orif. Different individuals who actually persevere end up getting to places. Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kam. So I want to say like this. The Malbim is Masber that part of the purpose of Mishlei and Shlomo HaMelech's objective is when he teaches us Ladas, Chochma, Musar, Lahavit, that means when Shlomo HaMelech wants to teach us Mishlei, is this exactly is what he wants to show us. The same Midah, the Midah of Gaiva, could be a wonderful Midah and it could be a horrible Midah. It could be your ruination and it could be what builds you. The same Midah, the Midah of Akshanis, could be something that destroys you, but it could be something that builds you. And how to know and how to figure, well, that has a lot to do with who you choose as a Rebbe. That has a lot to do with who you choose as a friend. That has a lot to do with how much you open your heart to listen to the people around you. And those are very important features in a person navigating some of the tools that are given to him, the God-given tools. Each person, kashem she'ein de'esem Shabbos, kachem partzufeim Shabbos. We each have different approaches to life. And none of us are the same. And some of us have a large measure of stubbornness, which could be moved and directed to very good. And I want to point this out like this. That means we all know that there's a Gemara in Baba Basra that tells us, like tehevi be'ibur achsanta, which means that if you're a dayan and you're sitting in Bezdin, make sure you don't sit in a case which looks to disown a person who rightfully deserves something. A father who's looking to disinherit a son from something that should be his oldest son, his youngest son, his middle son, make sure you're not part of that Bezdin. It's an Aveira. Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is manchel something to someone, when he gives a person assets, when he gives a person atzlacha, it's not only to him, it's lebanav, lebnei banav, ad seif kol haderes. So like tehevi be'ibur achsanta. The Gemara brings stories to prove this. From that Gemara, it seems to me, and I would have an understanding that it is the right thing for a father to have something to give to his son. It would be a good thing for a father to leave his son something. There's nothing wrong with it. Adarabah, the Gemara is telling us, it goes to the father, the son after that. There is makom for a father to hold what he has and to allow it to travel past him to future generations. That's the right way of looking at things. Yet, I want to talk about Rish Lakish. I want to show that he did not feel this way. And we have to understand him. Rish Lakish, first of all, the way he came to Yiddishkeit, we all know a famous story. He was a ganef. Maybe even more than a ganef. He was what you would call a mob leader. He ran a family. He saw Rabbi Yochanan bathing in the river once, and he mistook him for a woman. And interested in striking up a conversation, he jumped over a river, over a small creek, and he reached Rabbi Yochanan, seeing that he wasn't a woman. He looked at him and he says, "Wow!" He says, "Shufrach l'nashi, amazing! Your beauty, your handsomeness, your stateliness would be good for women." And Rabbi Yochanan, without missing a beat, he responds to him. He says, "Chelach lo yiraisa." He says, Your strength would be great for Torah." Rish Lakish was overwhelmed by the kindness. He was overwhelmed by the fact that this individual, a Rav, one of the Gedolei Hador, treated him like an equal, had a conversation with him. Rish Lakish says, I'm willing. And Rav Yochanan says, Hadarbach v'yahavas l'cha achti the shapira minoi. You want women, you want beauty? Come back, I'll give you my sister. She's more beautiful than me. Rish Lakish came back. Then, he told his friends goodbye, and he joined Rav Yochanan. He went and studied and became Rav Yochanan's equal. Rish Lakish became the bar plukta of Rav Yochanan. It's Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish. We see them as equals. Rish Lakish becomes one of the biggest Amoraim first generation Amoraim. What's interesting is that Rish Lakish shows a tremendous amount of impulsiveness, something that we as Jews were not so keen on, even though we did an Asav and Ishma, which was impulsiveness, but that's what Rish Lakish seems to show. Furthermore, the Gemara tells us in Gittin Daf Mem Zayin, Rish Lakish mocha nafshe leludoi. Rish Lakish zava nafshe leludoi. He sold himself to cannibals. He had no money. He counted on the possibility that he'll somehow escape. For the time being, this seemed like a good idea. He sold himself to cannibals. He got whatever money they were willing to give. Now, they would work a person for a few years, and then when the person wasn't able to work, or they felt that the person exceeded his work permit, they would cook him. They would kill him and cook him. But they had this idea that they would give the individual his last request. It's a machlekes between Rashi and the Aruch what that means. But Rashi says, they thought that they would be getting some sort of mechila. By doing that, he would forgive them and it would help them in the afterlife. The Aruch says, it would make the person taste better if he died with a happier understanding if he died with a happier mood, it would make him taste better. These were serious cannibals. These were people from Papua New Guinea. Now, Rish Lakish turns to them and he says, okay, I want my last wish. And he says, allow yourselves to be tied up and sitting down, and let me take a punch and a half at each of you. And he did, and without hesitation, he was very mighty. He killed them all. Okay? He then ran away. He escapes. It says, according to the Gemara, he leaves, ochal, he eats, he sleeps. I forgot what the lashon of the Gemara is, but I think the lashon of the Gemara, I wrote it down, 1 second. It says Yosef ka'ochel v'shasi. Yosef ka'ochel v'shasi. He ate, he sat, he ate, and he drank. This was his life for the rest of his life. Now, this is even when he was a Talmud Chacham, and the Gemara sees fit to tell us this, that all he did was he never saved anything. This gives us an idea of who Rish Lakish was. His impulsiveness was the way he lived life all the way till the end. Never saved a penny. He only ate, he drank, he sat. Ate, drank, and sat. Sat means he learned Torah. This was Rish Lakish. Not the way a person, not like the way a calculated individual does, where he sits, he thinks, he wastes only what he has to. No, Rish Lakish spent everything. When he needed more, he went and got more. Then he ate, he drank, and he sat. Ate and drank and sat. That's all he did. And when he was dying, the Gemara tells us when he was dying, he had a little pouch of saffron. It was a common spice they used then. Today it's expensive. And he gave it to his daughter. And he cried. He says, Ozvu lacherem chelam. Woe to me, I leave my wealth to others. What, even the little pouch of saffron he didn't fagin? He couldn't give it to his daughter happily? A small pouch of saffron? It makes no sense. The teretz is, Rish Lakish understood who he was. Rish Lakish recognized his tchunis, his nature, his characteristics. Rish Lakish understood he's an impulsive person. Rish Lakish understood that you could serve God through impulsivity. You could turn back to the Rebbeinu Shalom impulsively. When somebody recommends you learn a Masechta, you stay up the whole night and you do it. Rish Lakish understood that you could sell yourself to brigands because that was what he impulsively did in order to somehow to make money. Rish Lakish recognized who he was. And in that recognition, he served God to his utmost with the highest form of bitachon, with the form of trusting in God like no one else. So when he's finally dying and he's looking over his affairs and he's taking inventory and he's making a mega cheshbon hanefesh, a cheshbon hanefesh like every Jew is supposed to make before they leave. And he says, I did pretty good, but this little bit of saffron, I should have come in just on fumes. I should have come into the next world just on total bitachon. I feel bad that I'm doing this. It's a little bit of a negation to my assessment of who I am and what I'm supposed to be. That's what his complaint was. Because, yes, there are some that hold that we're supposed to work on eradicating every bad trait, but there is another way to eradicate bad traits, to utilize them for service of God, to utilize them for serving humanity, to utilize them in the proper way. So here what happened was Rish Lakish looked, impulsiveness is terrible. Impulsiveness allows you to sell yourself to brigands and criminals. But impulsiveness also allows you to become the biggest Talmud Chacham that ever existed. And impulsiveness allows you to be the biggest Beiteach B'Hashem. Impulsiveness allows you to do chasadim like no one ever did. The Yerushalmi in Trumas tells us about Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan once walked in. He walked in and he was very down. He couldn't talk. And people were asking him, what's wrong? Finally, he confessed. He says, on my way here, a bunch of criminals stopped me. They took away my wallet. I'm broke, he says. Halev toli bakis. My heart, amoyach toli balev. My head, my mind is connected to the heart. Valev toli bakis. If I have nothing in the house, the cupboard is bare. How could I learn? How could I do anything? Rish Lakish, without hearing another word, put on his coat, ran to the direction that the criminals were. Whatever he did, it's unclear. He brought back Rav Yechanan's pouch. Maybe he had a couple of teeth in his pocket also. Whatever he did was unclear. But that's impulsiveness that allows and affords a person to do a chesed that no one else could do. The Gemara brings down another story about Rav Ami, who was captured by pirates. And Rav Yonason comes in and he says, Yikora chameis b'sadina, there's nothing we could do. Rav Ami, I hope, has good shrouds because he's a dead man. Rish Lakish hears this, he says, you crazy? One of us? We're going to allow that? He puts on his coat, he runs out, he comes back with Rav Ami a few hours later. Who he beat up, who he killed, I don't know. No one wants to know. But the impulsiveness of Rish Lakish v'avodas Hashem did things, crossed bridges, climbed mountains nobody could climb. Because a person who understands himself and has a good appreciation of what he could do and what he can't do, could sometimes direct and utilize his koichas hanefesh in a way that no one else can. And this is important to understand. If you have a child who's in action, you know what? Make that action, take that action, and make that action do things that no one else could do. Utilize that akshanis in avodas Hashem, in growth, in ways that'll turn this person into a great person. If you're in action, try to utilize the action in you in a way that'll make you grow, in a way that'll make you steig. It's not necessarily the right thing to root out tchunis. The right thing is often to move them in a direction which has and adds profundity to you. And this is what Akavya b'Ma'alal was. Istakal b'shloisha dvarim. He utilized his midah of akshanas. He utilized his midah, his holy midah of stubbornness, and he put it into himself in a way that turned him into the icon that he was, that turned him into this greatest person, the person that didn't budge, the person that didn't yield, the person that was able to see things through to the end. Thank you so much for joining me